So in this video, we go over lots of DevOps, Linux, Git, and coding, Python, Flask, all those different concepts. It's quite a lot, but we needed an example, and the example is a mood tracking diary. But the concepts are obviously relevant to any kind of software delivery, whether that be um, Python or any other language. So we go over containers. So containers, typing, containers, Docker Compose, but also Podman, and we do a bit of Git, we do a little bit of command line, but most importantly, we also go to production really quickly with a live URL. And also we do automated release notes. So like each releases essentially on GitHub. And that does automatic change log and things like that. What else do we go over? That's about everything really, but it's the emphasis on speed, the emphasis on fast feedback, and how just with the tooling that you've got available with you today. Oh yeah, Dokku. So Dokku, which sits on top of Docker or any kind of container really, to help publish this kind of service. So all those open source technologies coming together to build something useful. So in this case, it's a mood tracking diary, very common for tracking mood over a period of time. Often it's using spreadsheets, but why not use it as an example for a web app? And obviously Flask, we go over Flask, which is a very popular Python web framework, but it could be any framework you want to use. Okay, so in this video, we're going to create a Python mood tracker using a database, as long as your website deploying. It's quite common to a container health and for people to be advised to create a mood diary to track. So today I feel great, today I feel awful. So yeah, that's the overview, and let's get started. So we're going to have a database, we're going to have a website. So the simple input is going to be the date and how they're feeling from 1 to 10. And maybe there's going to be a comment box as well. They're quite a common thing. Often they're spreadsheets that people use, but we're going to create a simple web app to do that. So firstly, let's create a GitHub repo. So for that, we're going to use another web host, another web service, and we're going to create a simple Flask app, which will have a nice getting started repo for us. So then we're going to clone that and start developing locally. So great, there we go, we've got the repo. Let's go to that repo and we'll start cloning that down. So we'll go into my documents, we'll put this in here, and we'll do a git clone. What we've got from this is a bare bones website. So I'll go into that folder now, container VM, and we'll do a Docker Compose up. So I've got Docker installed at the moment. If you've not got Docker installed, have a look at Docker Desktop, or alternatively, you could use Podman Desktop, which is just as good as well. So that's all starting up now. I'm going to have a look at that compose file. The reason for that is I want to know what port it's going to be listening on. So it's going to be listening on port 5000. Okay, so it's downloading first. Let's have a look at the getting started guide as well. View your app locally, Docker Compose up, build. Yep, that's all good. And whilst that's loading, we can see that it's being deployed as well. So there's a deployment going in the background. The URL at the moment is going to be based on the repo name, which can be changed at the end. So somewhere on here we can see the URL. There it is. Cool. So at the moment it's just a simple Flask app. Great, and it's running locally now. So locally we can look at the 127 address, which is the local host, and we've got the same app, but we can actually make some changes here. So let's do that. So we'll go into the app. Let's use VS Code for this so we can use a popular editor. And let's go into the source for the web site, and we want to change the template. So let's just look at the home page at the moment, and we'll say For the header, what's your mood today? And we'll put this in a form. So we'll create a form for people to submit to. And we'll probably have an input there, which is going to be a type of the date. And we'll have a name of date as well, because that's what it is. Okay, and we'll put in a label there for date, and we will say date today. We could probably automate that, but then someone might be inputting and maybe you forget and you want to put in your date for yesterday. So it's important to think about the user's experience as well. So we'll say date 4, so therefore we need to say ID equals date. There we go. Let's go back to our site, refresh. Great, we've seen that straight away. So we're starting to build up the site, and we've got this weird Flask that's taken from the official documentation. If you wanted to see that, you could see the Flask. Oh, there's a fantastic tutorial. Go to the web. Flask tutorial. If you're brand new to Flask, this tutorial is very good. That's where that name comes from. Or this website. So let's change that word Flasker to the top, and we'll call it Mood Diary. Mood Diary. There we go. Do a good old refresh. There it is. What's your mood today? Date today, and I'm missing the submit button. So let's add that. Submit. Sorry, input type equals submit. So there's no fancy React or anything like that. You don't need any of that for such a basic thing like this, especially when you're getting started, because all of those additional technologies can just overcomplicate and get in the way. So there we go. We've got the submit query. We don't want it to say that though. We'll say value equals submit. Refresh. Input type submit value equals submit. I can't see what the error I've made there. Oh, interesting. It's switching between the two. There might be some file system caching going on there between Docker and the files. Let's see. There we go. Great. Let's put that with a capital S. Interesting. I'll have to look into that. So I've changed that to capital S, and there we go. And let's just do a nice and simple break on there. So it's on a different line. Okay. The font and things, we can come back to that later. But let's get that published. Let's get started and get it live and iterate on top of that. So at the moment, we've got the repo. Here it is. Here's the URL. At the moment, you could go to that and it would be live, but it's showing the old application. So let's do a git commit and see if we can get that committed okay. All right, so to do the commit, what we're going to do is just get git status out, and we can see we've got these changes that we've made to our templates. So I'm looking at git diff. If you don't like doing things in terminal, you can have a look in the branch as well. So on VS Code, and you can see we've added those files there. And oh, I'm not in the right folder anymore. Let's open that in the correct folder. There we go. So now that's loaded up again. We can see we've got those changes, and we look at for the M for modified, and yeah, there's the changes. So we can say git add to add the changes that we want, git add and the file name. I'm going to do that for both of them. And now that they're added, they're in what's called the staging area on Git, and we can do a git commit and say, great, we're going to say added initial template for Mood Diary. It's always useful to have a specific commit so that when you look back at it, you can see what you've changed, because it's easy to forget when you've got loads of changes. So now we're going to push that up. Cool. Now let's try. Okay, so because there was a deployment that happened very recently, So this deployment added a release note and added that to the changelog. So we need to pull that down. So what we need to do is a git fetch. And then because we're on the master branch, we're going to do a git rebase origin main. And we can push that up back to the main branch now because we've updated our own branch with the changelog. So if we look at our changelog, we can see we've got the up-to-date changelog, and we're going to push, and then automatically we're going to have a new changelog updated for us, which is pretty cool. So got nothing changed. We can ignore that. In fact, let's do that now by adding a git ignore file. And we'll say just ignore PyCache all the time. You never want to commit that. Very important that we don't commit PyCache because sometimes things like credentials can be cached inside there, which we don't want to commit. Git, and we'll say git commit. We'll amend our current one to add that in. So there we go. Git push origin main. And there we go. We've pushed it up, and all of the automation starts automatically because it is automation. And off we go. So what's happening is a new release is being cut. So the changelog will be updated, and eventually we'll see on our website our mood tracker start to appear. So at the moment it's still running the old website, which is quite nice because it means you don't have any downtime. And if we can even watch the progress of the deploy happening as well. So we can see that it's doing the deploy step, and also it's doing the changelog, which is actually already finished. So if we have a look at the changelog, we can see we're now up to version 0.02, which is where we added the initial template for the mood diary. It's warning us because we push to the main. It's better to create an issue first and then merge that in, but we can do that in another video. So the deploy is happening. I'm going to keep refreshing this page, and in no time at all, we'll see the new website open up. Deploying, there'll be some like 10-second check, I think, by default. This is using something called dokku, which is a fantastic automation service built on top of Docker. It's quite hard to say, dokku. So you've got Docker, which is for a very well-branded container ecosystem, which uses Linux C groups and namespaces to create processes which are contained. You also got podman and things like builder and bezel and all sorts of different words to describe processes which are constrained to specific namespaces. And what dokku does, it's a very small but simple implementation of managing containers and making them run on a server. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So when we refresh, we're on the same web address, but we've got our new mood diary. Of course, it doesn't do anything yet, but I just wanted to show you that process of going to deployment. If you are interested in learning more about containers, there's a Linda, I think her name's Linda, and there's a good book called Container Security by Liz. Is it Liz? Yeah, Liz Rice. Really, really good book over the core concepts to do with containers and how they work. It's not just Docker, it's much deeper than that. Okay, great. So let's make this submit actually work and store something. So for that, we need a database. So let's just go to another web service and we'll create a database. So I just want a database. Great, we've got a database. Cool. So running locally, we're going to use these credentials to create a database to store the mood that I missed out the 1 to 10 rating. So we'll have to put that in as well. So let's go back to our code and we will edit the root. So when they've pressed submit, there'll be an action which is to save. So again, the Flask documentation is fantastic. I would encourage you to read the tutorial, but we can go into it right now as well. So we've added a new route. We're going to, sorry, add a new route called save. So we'll say app route save, and we will say def save. And what this is going to do, it's going to save the mood entered by the user. Okay, and just for testing, we're going to say hello, and that's going to accept something called a post request. What's a post request, I hear you say? So the HTTP protocol describes different methods. So when you go to a website, it uses the get message and get method. And when you submit something, it uses the post method. And a good resource is the developer. Mozilla Developer Network is a really good resource for learning about the different types of HTTP methods. So we're going to say about the post method, which is what happens when we submit, and we're going to change that here. So we're going to say action method equals post. By default, forms are submitted using get instead of post, but I would prefer to use a post for this. And there we go. Let's verify that that's working as we expect by going to our local host. First thing we're going to do is we're going to check that the route is working. So we're going to go to /save. Not found. Okay, what's going on there? Let's see. Let's restart our app. See what I've missed. Okay, I'm not looking hard enough. What am I missing? Gunicorn. Error. Let's have a look at the Docker Compose. Let's make sure that we're running in with Flask instead of Gunicorn to begin with. So let's set our environment, and we'll say Flask debug equals 1. And in our entry point, we will say, so we're entering the Docker ecosystem now, and we'll say if, we just do some little bash script to say if Flask ecosystem Flask debug is set, then run in Flask. So we'll say Flask run -- host on all ports, and on the port we'll say 5000, else run using Gunicorn, and we'll finish that off there. I think I've made a mistake with that, so let's test it in the terminal, because I can never remember how to check a variable is set in bash without Googling it. So I should just Google it really, but we'll find out. Entry point. So that's going to use that's using the Gunicorn. So we've got here. What about if we set Flask debug? Great, and then it runs in Flask mode. So that'll give us more access to debugging things and make it easier. But in order to make that work, we'll say docker compose, we'll say build, because we've changed the entry point, so it needs to build a new container. So this container here, which is built using this container file called Dockerfile, because it has the entry point inside of it from this copy, because we've changed it, we need to rebuild the container. And that's just come to an end, and we'll see Docker Compose up again. We should see that it's starting to run with Flask. There we go. And so Yes, it started to run with Flask, but we do also have an error. I just caught the bottom of the error where it said allowed methods as a list. So I've got a type error. So that's nice and helpful, that error message. So I've not put that in a list. So I need to put that in a list. I think it's always useful to keep the errors in the video so that other people, when they see them, get the same experience for learning and debugging. Okay, great. So now we've started again. Let's see if we've got that route now. Fantastic. So we've done a GET request to that route and we've got method not allowed. Why? Because we only said that post was allowed. And if we wanted to really see, we could open up network tools. And if I refresh now, there you go, there's that GET request. Now we only want it for post requests, but that's just for demonstration purposes. Allow it. See, now we've got a GET request and we're again a GET request, but we've allowed it. But actually we only want that save endpoint to be accessible to post requests. All right, great. So let's actually perform the request saving. So Flask has a built-in called request, and that gives us access to everything that was submitted. So we're going to put a save here, and we're going to put a breakpoint. So we're going to say the request.form is what we're going to access. But before we do that, we're going to use the built-in debugger with Python to inspect what happens when we get to that point. And to allow that to happen, we're going to add tty true. That will allow us to attach to the debugger inside the container. Okay, so let's run that container again, and we're going to go straight into the debugger. That did not happen. Let's see in the logs. Let's go back to our container. Here it is. Let's start that again because we've added that tty. Docker compose up. Here we go. And we'll go to that save again. Okay, I'm not seeing that debug. Where did I put the debug? Let's see. I put it on the save, so that's good. But what I'm doing is I'm refreshing and doing a get. So let's go to here and actually do a post request. See, so I'm going to choose a date. Let's just say today. I'll submit, and there we go. We've got the post request. Perfect. You see how it's hanging and it's going slowly? That's because we're on the breakpoint. And if we have a look here, we can see we're in the debug. It's not serviced the request. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a docker ps to get the container name. And we're going to say docker attach to that container, and we're in. So I'm going to do that request again, that post request. Submit. And we should be in the container debugger, but we're not. Why is that? I think it's because I've not added everything that I need here. There's a Docker Compose reference to attach standard in and standard out. So we've got the TTY set, and we've got not got standard in. There it is. Let's allow that as well. So we'll say TTY is true, standard in open. I think that's also a Boolean, but it's unfortunately doesn't actually say on the docs whether it's a Boolean or not. So I'm pretty sure it is. So let's do that close. Let's go back to our local host, and we will go back to the form, fill it out with a date, press submit. Great, it's still hanging. That's good. We've got the debugger going. Let's attach. No, we're not attached. Yes, we are. I just needed to press enter. There we go. Now we're in the debugger. We can see that we're at this point. How do I know that? Because I've got this arrow here. That's where we are. If I click next and then press L again, you can see we're now at hello. And if I press continue, it's going to continue the whole request. But what we want to do is inspect the request and see what data is available to us. So we're going to say save and do that once more. Press L, and we can look inside the request object. What I again encourage you to do is look at the Flask request object in the documentation, because it tells you all about that. Whoops. Yes, if Google didn't load things after you've searched, there we go. So there we go. Read all of this. And you can say request.form. And that's great, we've got all of that data that was just submitted. So you can say get, and what do we want to get? We want to get the date. And there we go, we've got the date. So in our code, we can say something like, I'd like to get the date out from that request. So we'll say, get rid of this, and we'll say the date is equal to request form date. And we can say something like, thank you for submitting the date. And we'll say date. So that's called an F string that we've got there. Sorry, I put the F in the wrong place. There we go, the F goes there. Obviously, we're going to add a step to save the data into the database very shortly. All right, let's see how we're going on. I'm going to remove the breakpoint now because I'm quite happy with how that works. There we go. Let's go back to here, fill out the form, and submit. There we go. Thank you for submitting the date. Perfect. All right. Obviously, it's not perfect because we're missing some important information, which is the mood itself. So let's go back to our template, and we'll say, please input your mood, and that will be a number. So we'll say this is the label for the mood and the mood rating. And we'll say that's going to be an integer, input type of a number, and the name is going to be, mood, or the ID is also going to be mood. That will help the labels. There we go, and we'll create this on a new line. Let's have a look at that, see how that looks. There we go. Won't win any design competitions, but the basis is there. And notice it's limited to a number. I thought, no, it's not. Type is number. Maybe it's, yes, there we go. Please enter a number. Notice that that's only client side. If we want to enforce that, we have to do the check on the server side, which is in the Python code. Okay. So using the same concept then, we're going to get we've already got the date. Now we're going to get the mood. So we'll say the mood equals request form get mood. And again, I'm going to step through on the breakpoint to show that in slow motion. All right, so I'm going to refresh, going to get my terminal open ready, and I'm going to give myself a mood rating of 10. And there we go, we're inside the debugger. Have a look at the L. So we've got the date, press N. Because we've passed that point, so we look at L, now we're past that point, we can say date, and we've got that, great. We can't say mood yet, why? Because the code hasn't got to that point, but we can go next. And now we've gone past the mood, we can read what the mood is. And I didn't update that, which I'm regretting now. So I wonder if I could change it right now. Let's see if we can. Let's have an experiment. Mood is mood. Let's see if that will allow us to do that. Maybe, maybe not. Oops, don't. Oh, don't. Continue is what I was supposed to write. There we go. Okay, so I need to add that additional place to mood equals mood. There we go. This is very repetitive, but we're getting there. Pressing submit again. Pressing continue on the debugger. Fantastic. There we go. So I'll commit where we've got up to. I'll remember to take out the breakpoint, otherwise it will stop. And let's commit where we've got up to. So we'll use VS Code this time. So we'll add that. I like the change there because it makes debugging easier. I'll add that there as well. What else did we change? Oh yeah, we've added the changes to the form. That's fab. And I'll do the commit as well. So we'll say git status, we're ready to go. Git, oh, git, did I miss something? Yes, I missed the app. Changes to the app, we added that route with the request object. So that's good. All right, cool. So now we're going to do our git commit message, added the /save endpoint. So let's push that to the GitHub. So as always, there's been some changes to the changelog. So we'll rebase for that onto main. And now we're going to push origin main. Vravavoom. Sweet. So let's go to our container, sorry, our GitHub repo. Great, we've got the commit. We can see the commit here. These are all the changes we've made. And as always, we've got those two actions running. We've got the changelog that's being updated, cut release. That won't take too long. Here we go. Oh, it didn't work. I don't know why. What's going on here? Oh, it's missing the identity. I don't know why, because it worked the last time. Let's see. Git log. Yeah, that's fine. Interesting. Let's revisit that. How's the deploy going? That's going fine too. We can retry the jobs. Usually it's good to find out what the cause is before just randomly retrying. But I will retry this one, see if it's anything temperamental. Let's see. So the cut release job simply updates the changelog and creates a release automatically. So you can see now we've got this collection of releases, which is accumulating quite nicely as we iterate on the app, on the product, if you want to call it a product. And I'm really interested in the deploy because obviously it's more exciting when it's live and running. So at the moment it's already done. Look at that. There we go. So we'll fill that in with a date and a mood. There we go. We've got the mood all deployed and ready to go. Let's see if that changelog is done now. Interesting. So the changelog didn't work the first time, but it did the second. And if we have a look at our changelog, we've got that lovely trail of what's changed in a human readable way. All right, let's leave it there for now. And then we'll add the database step by using the database service. Thanks for watching and subscribe if you like it.